Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The day I told my dad I was thinking about moving out, he didn't ask why, didn't blink, didn't even put down the wrench he was using to bang the hell out of some rusty old lawnmower blade in the garage. Just kind of chuckled, like I'd told him I was gonna join the circus or get a face tattoo or something equally ridiculous. I remember the smell of gasoline, the cracked cement under my shoes, and his words like they'd been branded onto the back of my teeth. He said, "If you're grown enough to move out, then you're grown enough to struggle." That was it. No, I'll help you find a place. No, do you need a hand with the deposit? Not even a, let me know if you need anything. Just that damn laugh of his and the sound of the wrench clanking back into the toolbox like a door slamming shut behind me. And maybe I was cocky back then. 19 and tired of rules, tired of the way he'd grunt instead of answer questions, tired of living in a house where feelings went to die. I thought I'd be better off on my own, that I'd finally breathe without his shadow pressed against my chest. I had maybe $200 to my name, a busted laptop, and a pile of clothes that barely filled 2 trash bags. That was my entire life, stuffed in black plastic, sweating in the back of my old Nissan that smelled like wet dog and despair. My mom didn't say much either. Just hugged me once, real quick, like I was leaving for summer camp and not flinging myself headfirst into a world that didn't give a damn whether I lived or starved. The place I found was the cheapest listing on Craigslist that wasn't listed as unofficial or next to a halfway house. For $100 a month, all utilities included, no lease required. Sounded like a dream until I walked up the piss-stained stairs of the building, past the vape shop that doubled as a front for God knows what. My studio apartment had one window, a stained mattress, and a kitchen that looked like it had been used in a crime scene. No hot water. One single overhead light that flickered like it was being powered by bad decisions. The smell was something between moldy pizza and cigarette ash, and I found my first cockroach before I even closed the door. It wasn't a home. It was a warning. But I unpacked anyway, set my 2 trash bags in the corner like they were suitcases, and sat down on the mattress trying not to cry. That first night, I laid awake listening to the guy upstairs scream at someone on speakerphone. At least 3 different cars with bass that could rattle bone rolled by between midnight and 4 a.m., and there was something dripping in the wall behind my head that never stopped. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My stomach was empty, my heart was pounding, and all I could think was, he let me do this. My own dad. Let me walk into this shithole of a life like it was a test I deserved to fail. And for what? So I'd toughen up? So I'd become a man in the same way he thought he was one? By the end of week 1, I was already behind on groceries, already wondering if I should crawl back home with my pride between my legs. I called him once. Just once. I told him the place was rough, that I was struggling. He said, "That's life. You'll figure it out," and hung up. Didn't even ask if I had food. I did figure it out, eventually. But not because of him. I found out the vape shop downstairs paid $25 a night to restock shelves and sweep floors, cash only, no questions. I started working from 10 at night to 3 in the morning just to afford instant noodles and dish soap. My hands were raw from scrubbing, and I started measuring time by how long it had been since I'd eaten something green. And still, every time I passed a mirror, I'd hear his laugh in the back of my mind, like a ghost reminding me that I chose this. Like he wanted me to fail just so he could say, "I told you so." That laugh stuck with me longer than the hunger ever did. Because hunger is a wound that heals. Laughter, mocking, bitter laughter from someone who was supposed to love you, is a scar that burns under the skin every time you remember how alone you felt. I kept telling myself I'd prove him wrong. That one day, I'd look him in the eye and show him what I built, what I survived, and he'd have to eat that goddamn smirk off his face. But even then, I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge, or just an apology. Just once. Just a little bit of, "I messed up, son. I should have been there." But he didn't believe in apologies. He believed in struggle. He believed that pain builds character and that comfort makes you soft. So I built myself hard, brick by bloody brick, and every one of those bricks was made from a moment I wish I didn't remember. Every skipped meal, every shift worked half sick, every winter night I spent wrapped in a hoodie instead of a coat because I couldn't afford one. That was my education. My tuition for a degree in surviving when no one's got your back. He laughed when I left. But I wasn't laughing anymore. There's a certain kind of silence that lives in shitty apartments, the kind where you can hear every breath from the guy in the unit next to yours, where footsteps upstairs sound like thunder, and the fridge hums like it's begging for death. That silence kept me company more than people ever did those first few months. I got up every morning, if you could even call it morning, after sleeping in tower stretches with a jacket for a blanket and a rolled-up hoodie for a pillow. The mattress in that place felt like it was stuffed with broken hangers and forgotten dreams. The roaches had the confidence of paying tenants, and the hot water never worked, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Just the price of freedom. I started working at a gas station that reeked of burnt coffee and fake pine air fresheners, pulling whatever hours they'd give me. Sometimes that meant opening up at 6 in the morning. Sometimes it meant locking the doors at midnight while some tweaker yelled at a vending machine. I didn't care. Money was money. I counted every dollar like it was gold, saved quarters in a mason jar like some kind of Depression-era ghost, and told myself one day I'd laugh about all of it. But when you're living off generic cereal and discount bread, the future doesn't feel funny. It feels like a goddamn uphill sprint in wet boots. There were weeks where I worked 16-hour shifts, straight from the gas station to a night gig at a local diner that paid under the table. That place had roaches too, just better lighting and a manager who didn't give a damn as long as the floors were clean and the cash drawer didn't come up short. I was 20 and already felt older than my father. My hands were always cracked, smelled like fryer oil or gasoline, and I got real good at pretending I wasn't exhausted. The worst part wasn't the work. The worst part was that I still picked up the phone, still tried to reach out to the man who threw me into the deep end and told me to swim with bricks in my pockets. The first time I called him, it rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I left a message, short. Nothing desperate. Told him I was working, living on my own, and that I hoped he was doing all right. Nothing back. 2 weeks later, I tried again, this time after a 12-hour shift that left my knees aching and my head spinning from fumes and bad coffee. I got the same silence. No reply. No missed call. Just a brick wall made of my own bloodline. That's when something in me started to snap, not loud or angry, but quiet and permanent. Like a door that shut and locked behind me, and I didn't even hear the click. I stopped calling. I stopped wondering. I stopped hoping for anything from the man who taught me to survive by abandoning me. And instead of drowning in that bitterness, I started using it. Turned it into fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about his face that day in the garage, how smug he looked, how proud he was of his so-called lesson. So I started hustling harder. Found out I could make decent cash cleaning gutters in the suburbs, especially if I undercut the big companies by $20 and showed up on time. Bought a cheap ladder off Craigslist, used my busted Nissan to haul tools, and posted ads on community boards and neighborhood Facebook groups. Gutter cleaning turned into pressure washing, turned into light-moving jobs, turned into real money. I flipped old furniture from yard sales, painted tables in my living room, sold them on Craigslist for triple the price. I fixed up busted bikes, mowed lawns, even hauled junk for hoarders who'd finally cracked under the weight of their own mess. Every job I took made me sharper. Every dollar I made was a middle finger raised in silent defiance. My bank account wasn't impressive, but it was mine. My back ached, my palms stayed blistered, and I still ate like a college dropout, but I was building something brick by brick, without his help, without his advice, without a damn thing from the man who laughed as I walked out the door. You know what's funny? I spent 6 months saving up $2,000 working at Wendy's, pulling double shifts 5 days a week. That's how hard I was grinding, never noticed how the math didn't even make sense, didn't care, just kept working like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Maybe it still does. By the time I was 25, I finally had something that looked like stability. A real apartment, one with working heat, no bugs, and a bathroom that didn't feel like a punishment. I had a little savings, a few contracts lined up for my small business, and enough pride to fill the whole damn living room. And the crazy part? My dad never knew, never asked, never showed up, never called. I could have been dead for all he cared. But I was alive, and that meant I'd already won. There comes a point where the pain doesn't sting the way it used to. It just settles deep into your bones like old weather damage, like the creak of wood that will never quite sit right again. By the time I hit my early 30s, I had my own company, a tight crew of 4 guys, 3 trucks, and enough steady contracts to keep us working through the winter without panic. I wasn't rich by any stretch, but the bills got paid early, the fridge was full, and I didn't flinch every time my phone buzzed, wondering if it was the landlord or the electric company ready to shut me off. And yet, even with all of that, with all the progress and the pride, there was always something hanging in the background, like static you can't tune out, like a loose thread in a sweater you're afraid to pull. I didn't talk about my father much, not because I'd made peace, but because there wasn't anything left to say. People who knew me well enough to ask got the short version. He wanted me to learn how to struggle, so I did. I hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. Not a Thanksgiving, not a birthday, not a single accidental run-in at a gas station or grocery store. It was like we'd lived parallel lives, sharing a name and a bloodline, but nothing else. I stopped wondering what he'd think of me a long time ago. I'd done all the things he said I'd never be able to do. I built something. I made it without him. Then one Tuesday morning, over coffee and toast, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged onto Facebook, mostly out of boredom, half hoping to see if anyone was selling used trailers in my area. And there it was, buried between a post about someone's dog and a local lost and found. Chuck Harper. My father's name in bold white font over a blurry photo of a house with weeds up to the knees and a cardboard sign in the window. Foreclosure auction, public listing. I stared at it for a full minute, coffee halfway to my mouth, the sound of the ceiling fan suddenly too loud, the air too still. I could have just kept scrolling. Part of me wanted to, but something made me click. His profile was public, still using the same photo from 10 years ago, him in a flannel shirt holding a fish, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong. The timeline was mostly empty except for pictures with some guys from the bar, a few memes about real men don't whine, and one blurry photo of the garage with some new tool set he probably couldn't afford. No pictures of grandkids. No family. Just fears and empty slogans and shadows of pride. I don't even know why I checked again the next day. Maybe I wanted to see if the auction had gone through. Maybe I was hoping for some kind of closure, or maybe I was just an idiot looking for pain in new packaging. Whatever the reason, I was sitting in the cab of my work truck, waiting for one of my guys to come out of the hardware store when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Habit, I guess. And then I heard it. That voice. Older, raspier, but unmistakable. Jake, he said. Just that. My name, like it still belonged to him. I didn't say anything, not at first. Just let the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. Jake, he said again, I need help. And for a second, just 1 second, I wanted to laugh. I wanted to laugh the way he did that day in the garage when I told him I was moving out. I wanted to say, if you're grown enough to own a house, you're grown enough to lose it. I wanted to serve him the same ice-cold pride he fed me by the spoonful when I was 19 and hungry and alone. But I didn't laugh. I didn't say a damn thing. I just listened as he stumbled through excuses and apologies he didn't know how to make, his voice cracking under the weight of all the years he never called, all the birthdays he ignored, all the nights I went to bed wondering why I wasn't worth a little compassion. I messed up, he finally said. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know what to do back then. I thought I was teaching you to be tough. I thought I was doing the right thing. He said it like he wanted forgiveness to be instant, like those words were magic, like just saying, "I'm sorry," could rewind a decade of silence and cold nights and broken trust. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, could hear my pulse in my ears, and still I said nothing. I just held the phone to my ear like it was some kind of relic, like maybe if I gripped it hard enough, the years would melt away, and I'd be 19 again, begging for someone to just care. But I wasn't 19 anymore. I was a man now. A man he didn't make. A man he didn't raise. A man forged in every second of pain he left me to carry alone. And finally, after a long pause, after he whispered, "I'm sorry, son," one last time, I took a breath and did the only thing that felt right. I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerful and hollow at the same time. There's a weird thing that happens when you finally say the quiet part out loud, the thing you've been chewing on in the back of your mind for years, the memory that comes up like a reflex, but never makes it into conversation. Once it's out there, once someone else hears it, it's real in a different kind of way. More solid, more raw, and harder to ignore. That moment hit me like a punch to the gut on a Sunday morning when my fiancé, Rachel, asked why I looked like I'd seen a ghost after I hung up the phone the other day. I told her, real calm, that was my dad. He asked me for help. She looked at me like I was holding a live grenade, waiting to see what I'd do with it. Then she asked me the one question I knew was coming but still wasn't ready for, "You didn't help your own dad?" I didn't answer right away, mostly because there's no quick explanation for what that man did to me, or more accurately, what he didn't do when it mattered most. How do you summarize a lifetime of silence and shrugged shoulders in a few words? How do you explain to someone who grew up with birthday cakes and bedtime stories what it feels like to spend a winter night sleeping in a frozen car because you couldn't make rent and the shelter was full? How do you make someone understand what it does to a kid to get laughed at by his own father when he's scared and trying to do the right thing? So I told her. Not all of it, because hell, I don't think I've ever told anyone all of it. But enough. I told her about the night I ate crackers and mustard for dinner because that's all I had in the cabinet. I told her about walking 5 miles in the snow to get to work because I couldn't afford gas. I told her about how my fingers would bleed from cleaning gutters without gloves because I couldn't buy decent ones without skipping a meal. I told her about birthdays where the only candle I saw was the one flickering on the stove burner, keeping the place warm enough not to die. And then I asked her right back, where the hell was he when I needed help? She didn't say much after that, just nodded and stared at her coffee like it had answers written in the foam. That silence between us said everything, though. She understood, even if she didn't like it. She saw the damage in real time, standing there in our nice kitchen with sunlight pouring in through windows I'd paid for with calloused hands and sleepless nights. But I'll be honest with you, it still didn't sit right. The revenge was clean, yeah. It was poetic in that life comes full circle kind of way, but it didn't feel good. Not really. It just felt unfinished. Like I'd won the fight but forgot why I threw the first punch. A few days later, I took a detour after a job out near my old neighborhood. I hadn't been there in years, not since before I moved out. The trees were bigger, the sidewalks more cracked, but the memories hit the same. I parked across the street from the house I grew up in, just sat there in my truck with the engine running low and my heart rattling like a loose belt under the hood. The house was smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling bad, like it had given up trying to hold it together. The porch sagged a little on one side, and the yard looked like it hadn't seen a mower in a whole damn season. And there he was, Chuck Harper, my father, sitting on the porch in a folding chair like he was waiting for something, or maybe like he'd forgotten what waiting was even for. He wasn't drinking a beer, wasn't tinkering with tools, just staring out across the street like he was looking at a world that moved on without him. His shoulders looked smaller. His face looked older. Not just in years, but in weight. In regret. I didn't get out of the truck. I didn't roll down the window. I just watched him for a while, trying to feel something that wasn't anger or pity. I thought maybe I'd feel satisfaction. Or victory. Or at least justice. But instead, all I felt was hollow. Like something had been scooped out of me years ago and never refilled. I kept hearing his voice from that phone call, cracking like old wood, shaking like a man who knew he didn't deserve mercy but asked for it anyway. And I kept hearing my own silence in return, how easy it was to hang up. How final. I sat there long enough for the sun to shift and cast long shadows across the yard. And then, without ever turning off the truck, I pulled away. No horn, no wave, no closure. I told myself I was done with him. I told myself I didn't owe him a goddamn thing. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's exactly what he deserved. But as I drove off, the road stretching empty ahead of me, I couldn't shake this feeling like something inside me had been left behind on that porch. Like maybe, in some twisted way, we both got exactly what we taught each other to expect: nothing. I taught myself how to survive. And in a way, so did he. So why does it still feel like I lost something? The voicemail came on a Thursday night, late enough that the world outside had quieted down into that strange stillness only found in suburbs after dark. When porch lights flicker across trimmed hedges and the sound of a lone car in the distance feels like thunder rolling through empty streets. I was sitting on my couch, shoes off, beer half warm in my hand, some dumb cooking show muttering nonsense in the background, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I never answered those anymore. I figured it was another client calling past business hours, or maybe someone trying to sell me something I didn't want and never asked for. But it wasn't that. Not this time. A few minutes later, the voicemail came through, and I stared at the notification like it had teeth. I didn't check it right away. I let it sit there like a ticking clock on my screen, like a landmine I wasn't sure I wanted to step on. But curiosity's a hell of a thing when it sneaks in through the cracks, and it only took maybe 20 minutes of pretending not to care before I pressed play. His voice was slower than I remembered. Slurred not from drink but from age, like the years had worn down his throat the same way wind chews through stone. "Jake," he said, and I knew immediately who it was, even though I hadn't heard his voice in years except for that one desperate call I never finished. "Jake, it's me. I don't know if you'll listen to this, or if you even care. Maybe you don't, and I wouldn't blame you. I guess I wouldn't even answer if I were you. But I had to try." There was a pause after that, long enough that I thought the message had ended, and for a second, I hoped it had. But then he kept going. "I was wrong," he said, slower this time, like the words were being pulled from the pit of his gut. "About everything. About how I handled you. About what I thought it meant to be a father. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, to be a man. But I wasn't. I was scared. Scared you'd end up like me, stuck in the same small town, doing the same damn job, pretending I was proud when I hated everything about my life. And when you said you were leaving, I didn't want to admit I was proud. Or afraid. So I pushed you away instead. That's what I do. That's what I've always done." I sat there, beer warm now, eyes locked on nothing, as his voice carried on like it hadn't already left a trail of wreckage behind. "You didn't deserve that. You were just a kid. A good one, too. Smarter than I ever gave you credit for. Better, probably, than I ever was. And I know I can't fix anything. I know I can't go back. But if there's a piece of you, any part, that still remembers when we used to work on that old Ford together or shoot hoops in the driveway, if there's anything left of those days, I just want you to know I'm sorry. For all of it." There was no fake toughness in his voice. No old bravado. Just a man who had finally run out of excuses and places to hide. The message ended with a soft sigh, like the kind someone lets out when they're empty. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something shift in my chest, like the old anger had loosened just a little. And then, without thinking, without hesitating, I hit delete. No archive. No saving it for later. Just gone. Like the rest of our history. erased with a tap of my thumb. A week later, his house was sold. I saw the post online again, this time marked sold ASIS. NO repairs. Vacant possession. No goodbye message. No new profile picture. Just silence from his side of the world. I didn't return any of the other calls. A few came in from some unfamiliar numbers. One from a neighbor, maybe, or a cousin I hadn't heard from since I was 10. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been left unsaid for years. Still, something inside me changed. Not all at once, not in a movie moment kind of way, but like a leak you don't notice until your feet are wet. One night, after a long day, I walked out into my garage, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge next to my toolbox, and sat on the old folding chair I kept in the corner. The light above me buzzed soft and dim, and for the first time I noticed how quiet the place was. Not peaceful, just quiet. Empty. I sat there, sipping that beer, staring at the floor like it might have answers written into the cracks. And it hit me then and there that maybe I had become more like him than I ever meant to. Not in the mistakes I made, not in how I'd treat my kids one day or the kind of man I'd try to be in public, but in the loneliness. In the way I had come to sit with it like it was a companion. In how I never reached out, even when I wanted to, just because pride had dug its claws too deep. We were both men who'd chosen silence when we should have spoken, chosen revenge when we should have sought peace. I had the money now. I had the house, the business, the comfort, the security. Everything I swore I'd get when I left him behind. But somewhere deep inside, I realized I'd carried part of him with me the whole damn way. And now, sitting in the dark, alone with a beer and my thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder if the real lesson he taught me wasn't how to survive, but how to shut out the people who mattered before they had a chance to hurt me again. Sometimes revenge tastes sweet. Other times, it just tastes like silence.